Orren SomberDeep was not born. His name is whispered beneath the floorboards of houses long since abandoned, murmured in mildew and forgotten lullabies. He did not arrive, he seeped in through the cracks, between walls, between dreams, between what was and what should never have been. He is not someone you meet. He is someone you remember incorrectly, as though waking from a dream with someone else's shadow still stitched to your heels. The stories he writes are not stories. They are not made, they are found. Dug up from beneath his fingernails, soaked in dream water and the static hum of distant rain. He does not invent, but recovers, loose, flickering fragments dredged from the silt of sleep. He is an archivist of memory that wasn't, cataloging every ache and echo with the patience of someone who knows time is a myth and forgetting is a form of survival. He dwells, if the word can even apply, in the city of nowhere, a place stitched together from half-burned maps and fog-choked intersections. The clocks there don't tick, not because they're broken, but because time has grown weary of being counted. The mirrors don't reflect, because nothing behind the glass wants to be seen anymore. The buildings lean inward, like gossiping old men, and the street lamps hum lullabies to no one. The air tastes of old rain and paper ash, and sometimes, if you breathe too deeply, you might hear a name you've forgotten how to miss. In this city, Orren walks. Slowly. As though afraid the ground beneath him might remember he doesn't belong. He drifts down corridors that weren't there yesterday. He speaks to cats that do not blink and people who have learned to live without faces. He rummages through attics that should not exist, rifling through boxes filled with teeth, postcards from unnamed oceans, photographs with no subjects. He writes not to remember, but to forget. He writes because the alternative is disappearing entirely, unraveling back into the silence from which he emerged. Each sentence is a tether, thread spun from dream stuff and panic, from longing and rot. Each paragraph is a window scraped clean with a fingernail, an attempt to see through the haze of everything he cannot bear to hold. But the more he writes, the more porous he becomes. Details slip. Time skips. He wakes in rooms he does not recognize, wearing coats that smell like other people's memories. And always, there is a door. A door at the end of a hallway that lengthens with every step. A door he has dreamed of, and fled from, and knocked upon in sleep. A door he cannot recall ever opening, though the key is always warm in his pocket. Some say Orren SomberDeep is a fiction wearing a man's skin. Others believe he is the after-image of a real person whose story refused to die quietly. He has been called a narrator, a parasite, a poem scrawled in grief. There are notebooks in certain libraries, usually shelved incorrectly, that contain passages in his voice, entries written in a script that flickers when read. Scholars dismiss them as apocryphal. But late at night, when the archive is still and the air presses close, the pages sometimes rustle on their own. Orren is both narrator and artifact, a ghost of ink drifting between the lines. He lives in margins and footnotes, in dreams you wake from thirsty, in the uneasy pause between knocking and answering. He might be the hum in the wall at 3:17 a.m., or the reason your reflection sometimes seems a beat too slow. When you forget why you walked into a room, or where you left something important, it may be that Orren has borrowed the moment. He does not seek recognition. In fact, the less you know of him, the safer you may be. But if you read his work, truly read it, you may feel him stir. You may hear your name spoken softly in a voice like damp paper tearing. You may find yourself dreaming of hallways that don't exist, of windows that open onto memories that are not your own. If you must read him, read carefully. He may already be reading you back. From the Diary of Orren SomberDeep. In the city of nowhere, the clocks don't tick. They hang from every wall. Grandfather clocks with empty pendulums, wristwatches wound too tightly to breathe, blinking digital ones frozen on improbable times like 88, 88, but not a single one moves. Instead, they hum faintly, like insects sleeping inside the gears. Not broken, just dreaming. Dreaming of lost time, or time misplaced in drawers, or dropped between couch cushions, or simply left behind like a suitcase on a train platform you'll never see again. The mirrors don't reflect, or rather, they reflect something, just never you. Look into one and perhaps you'll see your childhood bedroom, the wallpaper peeling like old thoughts. Or a crow perched on a fence post, watching you with your mother's eyes, neither cruel nor kind, just haunting. Sometimes the mirror reveals a staircase that curves upward into a ceilingless sky, steps too narrow for feet and too wide for wings. The city doesn't care who you think you are. Identity is just a visitor's coat, hung up and forgotten in the foyer. The air here tastes of old rain. Not the rain itself, but the memory of it, the ghost of petrichor, the ache before a thunderclap. Every breath is steeped in nostalgia for a storm that may never have happened. And when it rains, and it does, but not often, the rain falls upward. Gentle droplets rising from the cobblestones in slow ascent, catching in your hair like moths. The sky welcomes it. The clouds above blink, slowly, sleepily, like something enormous just beneath the surface of waking. People speak in half sentences. They begin to tell you something and stop halfway, as though the rest has already happened or might never happen at all. They carry umbrellas made of paper, decorated with words in languages no one remembers. No one opens them, not because the rain is harmless, it isn't, but because to open one is to accept the invitation. And few here want to ascend. Mara arrived by mistake, or so she claimed. The train she rode did not stop, only slowed as if reluctant, as if changing its mind at the last second. She stepped off anyway. The station was tiled in letters that rearranged themselves while you blinked. Welcome, they read, then forget, then almost home. When she looked again, they simply said shish. She walked past a cafe where the menu changed mid-sentence. Today's soup is, longing for. Chestnut ghosts in a sea of, she didn't stay. Past a cat curled on a window ledge, who blinked at her and spoke in her grandfather's voice, asking if she still liked thunderstorms. She did not answer. She wasn't sure. Past a boy in a woolen coat drawing doors in the dust with his finger. Some swung open and showed forests full of violin music. Others remained closed, pulsing faintly. He smiled at her without looking. You'll find yours, he said. Or it will find you. Eventually, she came to a garden growing beneath the shell of a collapsed piano. Its wooden ribs arched upward, holding soil and silence. Flowers bloomed there in impossible colors, grays and forgotten purples, tones that only appear in dreams or memory. They hummed in harmony, soft notes that settled in the chest like a lullaby long forgotten. One flower opened as she passed. Its petals peeled back like old paper, revealing a tiny, fogged mirror at its heart. She looked in. It didn't show her face. It showed a moment, her, younger, barefoot in a thunderstorm. Laughing, not in defiance, but in some private, wordless joy. Arms wide, eyes closed, a moment she had no conscious memory of. Not at first. But the air carried the taste of that forgotten rain, and somewhere deep within her, something shifted. She began to smile, not because she remembered, but because something inside her was remembering her. That's how the city works. You don't come to nowhere looking for something. You arrive because something remembers you, a memory adrift too long, an unfinished dream searching for a body to return to. You find yourself not in mirrors or maps, but in the way the ground tilts ever so slightly toward places you haven't been, or in the ache behind a smile you didn't know you had. The city of nowhere is not built of stone or steel. It is built of moments mislaid. Footsteps never taken. Names half forgotten. It is not haunted by ghosts, but by intentions. I came here long ago, I think. Or maybe I'm still on my way. It's hard to say. Time doesn't tick here. It hums. And tonight, it's humming your name. The House at the End of Sleep, Chapter 1. The Tearing Point, from the Diary of Orren SomberDeep. I hadn't slept in 6 nights. Not really. I would close my eyes and something would press against them, soft as wet fabric, heavy as grief. My body ached for rest, but my mind kept blinking through the walls. I saw things in the stillness. Not hallucinations. Not dreams. Something else. It began with shadows gathering in corners they shouldn't. Not menacing at first, just wrong. They bled too slowly across the ceiling, clung too tightly to the legs of furniture. The lamp in the hallway began humming, even when unplugged. I passed a mirror and caught my reflection blinking a fraction too late. There was a layer of dust on the floor that never stirred, no matter how I moved. And my voice, when I dared to speak, carried with it the faint grit of dust, as though memory itself was rotting in my mouth. On the seventh night, I stopped pretending to rest. I just sat, blinking at the dark, waiting for it to swallow me whole. Sleep had turned from a need into a terrain, one I could no longer enter. That's when the house came. Not with thunder or doors slamming. No crawling fog or flickering lights. Just, there, in the corner of the room where a bookshelf used to be. A door I didn't remember owning. Painted in peeling white, the color of old milk and dried bones. A brass handle slick with condensation, like something had just breathed on it from the other side. I didn't feel fear, not exactly. More like recognition. I opened it. The air inside the threshold smelled like wilted paper and wet stone. Dim light pulsed softly, as if trying not to wake anyone. The corridor beyond curved in a way that unsettled the eye, too narrow and yet impossibly wide, with a slow bend that seemed to lean away from itself. I stepped through. The door didn't close behind me. It dissolved. No click, no wind. Just a quiet unhappening, like a page removed from a book mid-sentence. I turned, and the room I'd come from was gone. Replaced by a hallway with no visible source of light, but shadows that flickered as if cast by flames. The wallpaper was damp to the touch and patterned with things I didn't want to recognize, repetitions of shapes that looked, just briefly, like teeth. I walked. Each step made a soft sigh beneath me, as though the house was breathing with me, or against me. The floor groaned, but not in protest. More like memory. Footsteps half remembered, looping into mine. There were rooms. Some open, some closed. One filled with clocks that ticked only when I blinked. Another with a staircase that ascended into a ceiling too low to contain it. One room was full of fog, and inside it, a violin played a song I recognized from a childhood I didn't live. In another, a woman's voice whispered my name in a language I did not speak, but somehow understood. I never saw her, only her shadow, cast across a bed that pulsed like a heartbeat. Time didn't pass normally there. I felt myself forgetting the weight of days, of mornings and evenings. My name peeled from me in flakes, like sunburned skin. I tried to hold on to it, repeated like a mantra. Orren SomberDeep, Orren SomberDeep. But even my voice started to sound unfamiliar, like someone imitating me badly. Eventually, I came to a room with no door. Just an opening, framed in red thread, as if sewn into the wall. I passed through it like a needle through cloth. Inside, everything was still. There was a bed, my bed, and me, asleep in it. But my chest wasn't rising. I watched myself for a long time, trying to decide if I was dead, or if I had finally, truly, begun to dream. Then I noticed a detail. A slow stain was blooming on the pillow, dark and deliberate. I leaned closer, and realized, it wasn't blood. It was ink. And it was writing something. Something I hadn't written yet. And all at once, I knew, this was the tearing point. The moment the mind slips loose of the tether. When sleep no longer shelters, but summons. The house had found me. And I had followed it home. Chapter 2. As I stepped fully into the house, the door side closed behind me, with the weary finality of something long used to being alone. The gray light did not brighten, but seemed instead to thicken, like fog trapped behind the windows. I walked slowly, my boots pressing into the warped floorboards, which bowed as if unsure whether to hold me or let me fall through. The jars, there must have been hundreds, lined every wall in lopsided grids, each one glowing faintly from within. Not light, exactly, but presence. Things floated inside, feathers that quivered without wind, coils of hair knotted into impossible shapes, small pale bones curled like sleeping animals. One jar held only a single tooth, pristine and childlike, floating in its amber prison as if waiting for the dreamer it belonged to. I did not recognize any of it, and yet I felt watched by every jar. Their contents seemed to lean toward me slightly, like petals toward warmth. There was a low table in the center of the room, half-rotted and sagging under the weight of dust. Upon it sat an old phonograph, its horn bent like a wilting flower. Beside it, a single glove, leather, cracked, too small for an adult's hand. I reached out to touch it, but before I could, the floor shivered. It was not an earthquake. It was quieter than that. Quieter than breath. Beneath my feet, Something shifted, timid, almost polite. As though the house were repositioning its slumber. I turned, and the jars seemed to realign themselves. The wall behind me now held different ones. One had a moth, wings outspread, with words etched across them in a language I had once dreamed. Another held a pocket watch, its second hand twitching backward, then forward, then stopping altogether. In the far corner, a narrow staircase led upward, but it looked more like a wound than a corridor. The banister was missing, and the steps bled rust where nails once held them firm. I stood at the bottom, unsure if I had descended or ascended to this point. Then a sound, not loud, but clear. A child's voice, distant and wrong, singing a tune I knew only in the marrow. Come back, to the place where you fell. I froze. I had heard it before. On a day long forgotten, under sun-stained sheets hung out to dry. A child I used to know had sung it. Maybe me, maybe not. The house leaned closer. I reached into my coat pocket and found something I hadn't placed there. A key, brass, warm to the touch. Its teeth were jagged, cruel, like it had been gnawed into shape. One of the jars near the door now held a mirror. No, it held a mirror reflection. Mine, but not as I was now. I saw a younger face, blood at the temple, eyes wide with something like apology. It blinked. I stepped away. Somewhere above, something moved, scraping, hesitant. The sound of furniture being dragged across a floor that no longer existed. I looked back toward the staircase. It hadn't moved, but the shadows on it had. Come back, come back. The song again, but closer. Beneath the floorboards now, or inside the walls, or inside me. I don't know how long I stood there. The gray light did not change. The house had no clocks, only echoes. Memory here was not tethered to time, but to place. 2 objects, 2 wounds. I finally moved, not up the staircase, but through a small door beneath it, one I hadn't noticed until now. I had to crouch to fit through. The key, warm in my hand, pulsed like a heartbeat. Before the door closed behind me, I looked once more at the room of jars. Somehow, I knew that one of them now held my voice. And I hadn't even noticed it go. Chapter 3. The Jarred Room. The air thickened, each breath a slow pull of honeyed smoke that clung to my lungs, as if the house meant to preserve me too, pickle me in longing, salt me in dread. The jars flickered with strange reflections, faces, or perhaps shadows shaped like faces, twisting just beyond clear sight. I blinked. They did not vanish. They breathed, moved. They swam in and out of focus, like memories trying to form words but stuck on the edge of speech, gasping through liquid time. Beneath my feet, the floorboards shifted again, a deep slow groan followed by a soft, wet squelch, like a tongue moving behind plaster, or a wound beneath bandages. The house was not creaking. It was remembering. It was aching. The scent changed. Gone the cloying smoke. Now something bright and sharp cut through. Ozone, the scent that cracks the sky open before lightning strikes. It mingled with something sweeter, achingly familiar, the faintest trace of a perfume I hadn't smelled since childhood. A scent worn by no one but the idea of someone. A woman whose face I remembered only in dreams. My mother. My aunt. A stranger who once held my hand in a room full of green curtains. I couldn't place it. That was the worst of it. Not the forgetting, but the almost remembering. I reached for one of the jars. My hand shook like the air around it. The glass was colder than ice, but inside the amber, something pulsed. It was not metaphor. It was not poetic fancy. It pulsed. A tiny, rhythmic throb, unmistakable. A heartbeat, trapped in time. And not just any time, my ache, my childhood fear, the moment just before the fall. Just before the voice on the other end of the line said, "There's been an accident." A whisper curled around me, soft as silk and impossible to localize. You remember. The voice was mine, but not mine. An echo with a bruise in it. Like a version of myself that had never stopped crying, somewhere beneath the skin of every dream. I turned, but the room had shifted. The jars were no longer lining the walls. They were suspended in the air, orbiting slowly, casting pale amber shadows across surfaces that no longer held corners. Geometry failed. Angles melted. I closed my eyes. The room folded inward, into itself. Into me. The line between the house and the memory began to unravel like thread pulled too tight for too long. Every sound became taste, every texture a color, every flicker of light a name I had once spoken in sleep. The house was no longer house, it was story. Layered, living, rotten at the edges. And in the center, a door. Not in a wall, just in. A door in space itself. Wooden, peeling, familiar. My hand moved before thought. The door opened with a sigh. And there she was. Hair the color of faded postcards. Eyes gray as ashen mirrors. Sitting on the edge of a child's bed that I could no longer fit into, humming a lullaby with no tune. She looked up at me. And smiled. "You left me here," she said, not accusing, but simple, like a fact. Like a name written on the underside of a desk. My knees gave way. Not from guilt, not from fear, from the sheer weight of the remembering. Chapter 4. I sank to my knees, the floor beneath me softening, yielding like soaked paper. My palms met carpet, not the slick, breathing wood of the jarred room, but the familiar shag of a childhood bedroom. Faded blue, stained in the corner where the humidifier once leaked. It even smelled the same. Dust, crayons, the sour trace of once spilled apple juice that no cleaning could ever quite remove. She hadn't moved. She watched me as if no time had passed. As if I were still 7 and asking her if monsters could crawl out of dreams and into closets. Her face bore no judgment. Just a slow, almost maternal stillness, like waiting for a confession that had already been given in sleep. "You left me here," she said again. "You had to. But that doesn't mean you didn't want to." Her voice curled through the room, a blend of lullaby and blade. "I didn't," I began, but my tongue failed the sentence. My mouth filled with salt. I tried to speak again and choked instead on names I hadn't spoken in decades. Elsinore, Mira, father, names that bled when remembered. She stood, slowly, and the light shifted. There was no source, just a change. The way it changes in a storm when clouds thicken but rain hasn't come yet. Her body cast no shadow. And when she moved, she dragged sound with her, like a heavy dress pulling across glass. "Do you want to see where the rest of you is?" she asked. The door behind her, the same door I had just walked through, was no longer behind me. It was now ahead, receding, as if the room kept elongating, dragging me with it. I stood without knowing how. "Where?" I began. "Where are we really?" She smiled. This time it touched her eyes, but not with warmth. With recognition. "We're in the moment you broke," she said. "The one you never woke from." I didn't understand, but I felt it. A pressure in my ribs. A ghost weight where a memory should be. I reached for the wall for balance and found my hand pressing against glass again. A jar. Another jar. But this one was enormous, taller than I was, and within it, floating, suspended in amber light, was me. Or a version of me. Smaller. Younger. Clutching something to my chest. A bundle of cloth. No. A stuffed bear. One eye missing. My name stitched poorly across its belly in crooked thread. My mouth hung open in a silent scream. Or was I singing? "You were left in pieces," she said. "Some here, some deeper." I turned to her, trembling. "Can I bring him back?" She stepped aside. The door, again, closer now. Breathing. Yes, breathing. The wood pulsed faintly with each beat of the memory. Its frame shimmered with dust motes that blinked out if looked at directly. A hinge clicked slowly, as if responding to my longing rather than my hand. "I don't know what's behind that one," she whispered. I looked back, but she was no longer there. Just a jar. Small. Simple. Nestled on the bed like a child's toy. Inside it, a photograph. Burnt at the edges. Me, again, smiling. Beside someone whose face was scratched out. Not blurred, not faded, violently removed. The door opened. And I stepped through. Chapter 5. The Room Beyond. The door inhaled as I passed through it. That's the only way I can describe it. It drew me in, not with force, but with expectation. As if it had been waiting, not just for me, but for this version of me. The me that remembered, that trembled, that had tasted the air of jars and recognized the voice that once soothed me in a storm. I stepped into a garden. Indoors, or beneath something. The sky above me was fabric, heavy, pleated, dark as deep water. Beneath my feet, black soil steamed in the silence. Stones shifted in patterns that changed when I wasn't looking. Strange vines grew sideways from empty air, flowering with things that looked like bones and dreams and childhood notes folded into star shapes. She stood at the far edge of the garden, barefoot, arms crossed, eyes sharp with waking. Her name surfaced in me before she spoke. Ch1-10. My cousin, but not one I remembered growing up with. No, she was from a side branch of the family tree I was told had withered away in the north, after the incident at Marrow Glen. She looked like she'd walked here straight from a nightmare and hadn't yet decided if this was better or worse. "You're real," she said. "I thought I'd made you up." I approached slowly. I could say the same. She tilted her head, examining me like a photo from a stranger's album. "I dreamt of this place," she said. "Not once. Constantly. Since I was a child. The jars, the rooms. The peeling names on the walls. I thought it was inherited madness. But it's not. It's here." I nodded. I wanted to embrace her, to hold tight to someone who knew. But neither of us moved. This wasn't a reunion, it was a convergence. Something was pulling us both. "I think the house remembers us," she whispered. "Even if we forgot each other." As if in answer, the soil around us exhaled steam. A low moan sounded beneath the roots, deep, glacial, like the creak of something ancient turning in its sleep. And from the dark petals of a nearby vine, something bloomed, a face. My face, sleeping, and beside it, hers. We stepped back. Talia's voice broke. "Orren, there's something wrong with our family. We were bred to forget," I said, without meaning to. "Or buried in the forgetting." She reached into her coat and pulled out a bundle, carefully wrapped in silk the color of old milk. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a page torn from a diary. A fragment of a letter. And a lock of hair, tied in ribbon. "She called it the Blood House," Talia said. "Our great-grandmother said it was built to trap what the SomberDeeps carried in our dreams. Not protect us, contain us." Before I could speak, the room bent. Tilted. We were not alone. Elsewhere in the house, the east stair. He did not know the name of the place. Only that it had called him, in dreams shaped like his father's voice. In whispers curled like candle smoke. Elias SomberDeep, nephew, wanderer, archivist of the unseen. He arrived under dusk, when the house barely breathed above the hill, cloaked in ivy and fog. The front door did not open for him. It opened of him, responding to something in his marrow. Now he walked the east stair, his hand trailing the banister carved with unreadable symbols, each groove warm as skin. The air was thick here, humming faintly with sound that didn't come from the world. Not quite music, not quite breath, a name trying to remember itself. He paused. A flicker at the edge of the landing, movement. He turned. Not a shadow, not a ghost. A boy. No older than 10, wearing clothes from a century ago. He looked back at Elias with mournful eyes, then stepped backward through a wall that softened around him like water. Elias did not follow. Not yet. He looked up. Etched in the ceiling above him, in lines of gold paint half faded. To dream is to fracture. To fracture is to feed. He swallowed. Took another step. Something was coming together. Threads were weaving, but whether they formed a noose or a net, he could not yet say. Chapter 6. The Mirror Route. Elias descended the east stair in silence. The air thickened the deeper he went, dense as syrup, humming with unseen tension. The walls pulsed softly now, not with life but with listening. Here, the house was neither asleep nor awake, it was in a state between. Watching, holding its breath. His boots struck old wood that no longer echoed. Sound was swallowed before it fully formed. Even his thoughts felt muffled, as if he were thinking through water. He passed long windows that showed only fog beyond, despite the night he'd seen outside when he entered. A hallway stretched ahead, narrower now. The carpet was a pale moss green, curling at the edges, patterned with twisting roots that changed when he blinked. He paused at a closed door, smaller than the others, warped by moisture or memory. His hand hovered over the knob. Something inside pressed back, as if the door were skin stretched tight over a heartbeat. He opened it. Inside was a small room lit from nowhere. A mirror stood in the center, tall, framed in tarnished silver. The glass was not glass, it rippled, faintly, like a lake disturbed by breath. Elias approached. The reflection showed him, but not quite. His face looked too young. His eyes were wrong, and there was someone beside him, two figures, blurry, holding his arms. Their faces gone, scratched out, just like the photo Orren had seen. The mirror darkened, then bloomed with image. The garden room, Orren, Talia, standing before the vines with faces. Elias stepped back, breath caught, then forward again. The mirror grew brighter, sharper, not just an image, it was an opening. He touched the surface, and the house exhaled. The mirror deepened, and the room around him cracked, not loudly, not violently, but like paper folding into a new shape. The east wing bent, stairwells rotating softly, old furniture rearranging itself with the logic of dreams. Corridors aligned, doors melted into thresholds. And Elias stepped through. Convergence, the garden room beneath the fabric sky. Talia turned suddenly. I felt something shift, she said. The soil underfoot had gone still, too still. The vines no longer bloomed with faces but receded, as if retreating from something approaching. Orren reached out and steadied her, and for a moment, there was nothing surreal, just warmth. Contact. Blood recognizing blood. Then the far edge of the room brightened. A tear formed in the hanging sky, vertical, shivering, and from it stepped Elias. Pale, wide-eyed, drenched in the quiet sweat of dream travel. He saw them. Talia, he said, and, Orren. Elias, Talia breathed. You're here too. I was called, he said, his voice cracking. I thought it was madness. But it's this. It's always been this. The three stood in a loose triangle, connected now not just by blood but by fracture. The house was weaving them together. The vines began to bloom again. This time with words. Each petal unfurled to reveal fragments, written in ink, etched in thread, whispered in cursive, names, phrases, warnings. Talia stepped closer. These are from my dreams, she said, voice small. The same words, the same script. Orren knelt and touched a fallen petal. It dissolved into powder, ash, memory. Elias stepped forward. He looked at them both. We're not here to escape, he said slowly. We're here because something beneath us is waking. Something older than us all. Talia nodded. Something buried in the root of the house. In the family. The three stood silently for a long time. And then, as if answering their gathered thoughts, a new door grew in the garden wall. Not carved, not built, grown. Woven from dark wood and weeping leaves. At its center, the SomberDeep crest, warped and flickering. The house had chosen. The way forward was open. But nothing beyond would be what they remembered. Or hoped. Only what they had forgotten. And what had never forgotten them. Chapter 7, The Root Below the Root. The door did not open. It relented. Petalwood peeled away in silence, unfolding like the fingers of a dying god, revealing not a hallway but a shaft, a wide descent of spiral stairs carved from roots, slick with memory. It went downward far longer than any foundation should have allowed. The air smelled of coal smoke and cradle blankets. There was no breeze, and yet the hair on Orren's arms lifted. The three stood for a breathless moment before Talia spoke. Once we go down, we won't come up the same. We haven't been the same since we set foot in this place, Elias murmured. They stepped through, together. Each footfall echoed like a name being struck from a ledger. Below. The descent warped time. It might have been minutes. It might have been weeks. Dreams leaked through the cracks between steps. Elias saw his childhood self disappear behind an old wardrobe. Talia watched her own mother vanish inside a mirror. Orren felt his heartbeat sink with something massive beneath the stairs. Not human, not dead, but patient. And then, stillness. They emerged into a chamber carved from what looked like fossilized sleep. Walls of soft black stone pulsed gently with veins of silver light. The floor was dust, deep and soft. At the center of the room stood a table, round, stone, and old as ruin. Upon it, 4 chairs. One was already occupied. The fourth person stood as they entered. A woman, late 20s, maybe. dressed like she hadn't expected to be part of anything tonight, torn denim, work boots, a field jacket. Her hair was tied back roughly, her eyes wide but not frightened. Curious, troubled. "Who are you?" Talia asked, stepping forward. The woman took a moment before answering. "My name is Luna Meyer," she said. "I was hiking near Marrow Vale. I fell asleep under a twisted tree. When I woke up, this house was around me." Elias blinked. "No one lives near Marrow Vale anymore." "I know," she said. "That's why I was there. I'm a restoration archivist, mapping forgotten sites and ancestral burial grounds. But the land was wrong. My GPS kept looping. Then the tree appeared. I touched it in." She looked down at her hands. "Then this room. You." Orren stepped closer. "You're not SomberDeep," he said. "But you're part of it." Luna laughed softly. "My grandmother's name was Somberage, I think. Changed after she ran from something in the north. She never spoke of her family. Only her dreams." Talia froze. "Somberage. That's the name my great-aunt used after the fire at Bell Hollow." The house groaned around them. Soft, like settling bones. The table flickered. And suddenly, it was no longer empty. 4 objects now sat at its center, arranged like offerings. A bone comb. A child's tooth wrapped in cloth. A key, rusted and broken. And a black feather, still wet. Each of them recognized one without knowing why. Luna reached first. Her fingers brushed the feather, and the chamber pulsed. The walls opened. Behind them, a long hallway made of memory and root, curving toward a glow that throbbed like a heartbeat beneath the world. "The house called you," Orren said quietly. "All of us. But it needed you." "Why?" Luna asked. Elias ran a hand along the stone. "Because we've been swimming in the house's memory. But you're the key to its forgetting." Talia's voice was barely above a whisper. "To free it." Luna stared down the glowing corridor. "I don't know what's down there," she said. "But I think I've been walking toward it my whole life." Together, the 4 stepped forward. Behind them, the room began to unravel. And ahead, deep below the house, where no architecture should exist, something ancient stirred. It did not breathe. It did not speak. But it remembered them. And it had questions. Chapter 8, The Corridors Beneath, the House Above. The corridor throbbed with a pulse that was not light, not heat, but some third thing, older than either. The walls were smooth, veined like onyx filled with breathing silver, and they curved unnaturally, no sharp corners, only soft, intestinal turns, as if carved from the roots of a god's dream. The 4 walked in silence. Orren led, his steps slow but steady. Talia followed, her fingers grazing the walls, reading vibrations like old braille. Elias carried the key. It had begun to tremble faintly in his hand. And Luna, the outsider, walked with a strange calm, half childlike wonder, half somber recognition, like someone recognizing a place from a story their bones had once whispered. "Do you feel it?" Luna said. "The tension. Like something's watching us from inside us," Elias replied. "Or behind the walls." Orren stopped suddenly. "Not watching," he said. "Waiting." And behind them, a low shudder crawled up the corridor. As though something vast had shifted. Above, elsewhere in the house. The house sighed. Books fell open on their own. Floorboards inverted. Portraits blinked. A locked drawer in a forgotten bedroom yawned wide to reveal a crumbling dress, still wet with seawater. In the west wing, a staircase melted into a spiral. In the attic, long dormant bells began to chime, not with clappers but with tongues. In the jarred room, several jars shattered, at once, soundlessly. Their contents vanished, leaving behind only the scent of nursery powder and ozone. A hallway previously sealed behind a bookcase opened, revealing a room full of empty chairs, all turned toward a single, cracked mirror that now showed 4 shadows walking somewhere far below. And in the long hallway where no clocks ever ticked, the grandfather clock began to hum. The house was aligning. Not preparing for collapse, preparing to remember. Below, the corridor narrows. They walked now single file, the ceiling pressing low. "We're descending into something other than history," Talia murmured. "This isn't memory, it's intention." Luna reached out and stopped, her hand hovering over a panel in the wall. It was carved, or grown, with the shape of a tree, its branches knotted into a spiral. At its roots were 4 names, faded almost entirely. One glimmered faintly, Elmire. She touched it. The corridor widened instantly with a sound like cracking bone wrapped in honey. Light bloomed, dim and warm, revealing a chamber at the end of the path. Circular. Old. A stone basin stood at the center, filled not with water, but with sleep. That's the only word for it. A swirling pool of dim, pearlescent vapor, thick and curling like breath on glass. And within it, dimly, figures. Faces. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. All sleeping, some weeping, some singing soundlessly, and every one of them. SomberDeep. Elias stepped forward, his breath ragged. They're us. No, Orren whispered. They're the versions of us the house chose not to keep. Luna knelt beside the basin. This is what the house does, she said. It doesn't just remember. It collects, preserves, all ourselves, every path we didn't walk, every memory too dangerous to bear, every fracture we survived by leaving part of ourselves behind. Talia's voice was barely audible. We're not here to escape. We're here to choose. The sleep in the basin began to rise, forming a tendril, reaching toward her, coiling around her wrist with gentleness and immense weight. We've come, Luna said softly. Now what do you want us to become? The house did not answer in words. But above, in a nursery long sealed shut, a cradle began to rock itself. And in the root chamber, 4 new chairs were forming, growing upward, pulsing faintly with breath. Chapter 9, The Split Tree. The vapor rose from the basin like a question exhaled in a darkened room. It curled around them in tendrils, not binding, but beckoning. One by one, it touched their skin, and with each touch, the world inside the chamber began to fragment. Not explode, not vanish, just tilt, as if the axis of reality had slowly begun to spin in the other direction. Orren was the first to fall. Or no, not fall. Split. He did not feel the ground leave his feet. He simply looked at the basin, and was suddenly elsewhere. Orren, the version that stayed behind. He sat in the house, alone. Never left, never questioned, never opened the door, never looked for memory. The house fed him bland dreams and dim rooms. He aged slowly, listlessly. No family, no words. A face in a window. A man-shaped silence. He turned to the real Orren and said, "This is what comfort costs." Orren recoiled, and the world folded back. Talia, the version that burned the tree. She stood in a garden of ash. Around her, the twisted family tree, once alive with memory, was blackened, still smoldering. She held the match. Her eyes were raw, her voice firm. I didn't want to remember. I wanted to be free. And in her freedom, she had lost even herself. A life with no ancestry. No hauntings. No past. No roots. The fire whispered, "You are not your story. But you are your forgetting." Elias, the version that answered the house. He was 12, maybe 13, when he came back alone. No one believed the dreams, but the house had whispered. And he had answered. Alone. Too young. It had given him its memory. All of it. Too fast. Too much. Now he wandered its rooms, forever ageless, a vessel of rotted lore. A librarian of pain. When the real Elias saw him, the boy smiled. "You don't get to forget," he said. "Not after what we lost to keep it quiet." Luna, the version that walked away. She had found the tree. Had seen the house shimmer in her peripheral vision. But she'd turned away. Lived a simple life. Built fences. Filed documents. Died quietly. Now she stood beside the basin's vapor, looking at her own ghost. "But I still knew," she whispered. "Even without it, I felt it all my life." Her alternate self nodded. "You're the reason the house never closed. It left the door cracked. For you." And above, at the threshold. The wind carried no sound, but the gates creaked anyway. A man stood at the overgrown fence. Early 40s. Gaunt. Pale. Wrapped in a funeral coat still stained from where rain had soaked through during the burial. He held a letter. It was torn, waterlogged, written in a hand that trembled at the end. If anything happens, go to the house. You're SomberDeep, whether you know it or not. His name was Rowan Holt. His mother had hidden the name. Hidden everything. Until the crash. Until the glass. Until the last words at her bedside. He looked at the house. It breathed. He took a step, and the iron gate opened without touch. The house had noticed, and it did not know him. But it recognized him. In the far west wing, a locked room unlaced itself like a corset. Inside, a chair, empty, waiting, and behind it, scratched into the wall. We buried the wrong child. Back below. The four emerged from the basin, drenched in selves that might have been changed, quiet. The vapor pulled back into its bowl. Talia spoke first, her voice glass thin. The house isn't just memory. It's choice, and punishment. Elias said nothing, just held the key tighter. Luna stared at her hands, which now bore a faint pattern, veins of ink like rootwork curling up her wrists. Orren turned toward the next door, newly grown from the stone. It bore no handle, only a question carved in the grain: which of you is real? Chapter 10, The Guest Whose Name Was Hidden. The house welcomed Rowan with a silence so absolute it was almost cruel. No groan of hinges, no whisper of wind. Just the faint smell of old smoke, lavender, and something metallic, like rust or dried blood. He stepped over the threshold. The door closed behind him without sound. Rowan paused. He looked up. The ceiling above the entryway bore a mural, faded, peeling, forgotten, but now it shimmered. A family tree, stretching into fractal branches. But instead of names, there were faces, blurred by time. One of them pulsed faintly. Rowan felt sick. He walked forward, boots echoing on cold wood. The hall shifted slightly beneath his weight, as if adjusting to him. He did not yet know the rooms were rearranging behind him. That portraits blinked when he wasn't looking. That somewhere above, a clock had begun ticking backward in perfect time with his heartbeat. A hallway opened to his right. He followed it. Room of misdirection. It looked like a living room, once. Now it was lined with chairs, none of them matching, each facing a blank television that hissed with static and fog. One flickered on as he passed. It showed a home video. A boy, a woman. Him, and his mother. A birthday cake with no candles. A tune hummed off-key. She was crying while she sang. The tape looped, reversed, played again, her face distorted slightly each time. Rowan turned away. The next doorway was already open. Above, the house reacts. A door on the third floor opened to nothing. Just black space, humming. A painting wept. The long hallway of sealed rooms, those holding the failed SomberDeeps, shivered. One of the doors unlocked. And somewhere below, in the basin chamber, a hairline crack appeared in the stone edge. Rowan's descent. He descended a staircase that hadn't existed moments before. Each step bore a word carved into it, but they were written in mirror script. He didn't try to read them. He felt them. They were names. He was halfway down when he heard it, a voice. Faint, female, familiar. Don't open the red door, R.O. That's where the forgetting lives. His mother's voice. He reached the bottom. There were 3 doors. One was red. He stepped toward it. Below, the door that asks. Orren stared at the inscription. Which of you is real? The question curled off the wood like smoke. The door had no knob. Just the words, endlessly recarving themselves as if uncertain of their own phrasing. Elias pressed his palm to it. Nothing. Talia tried to speak aloud. Her voice vanished halfway through the sentence. Only Luna moved differently. She stepped forward, not boldly, but with familiarity. I've heard this question before, she said. In dreams, it never asks for truth. It asks for surrender. Orren turned to her. Surrender what? Whichever part of you is never supposed to survive. The vapor from the basin still curled faintly from their clothes. Orren felt his own face fracture in his thoughts. The man who left, the man who stayed, the man who forgot. He stepped closer. I think it's not asking who is real, he said slowly. It's asking who is willing to be. Luna nodded. Then we go through together. But not as fragments. Elias placed the broken key against the door. It didn't fit. Talia pulled the comb from her pocket. Set it against the door. It didn't move. Orren held up the tooth. The cloth unraveled as he did. It began to hum. Luna touched the feather to the door. And the words changed. Then come in, and leave your name behind. The door breathed, opened. Above, Rowan, at the red door. He reached out. Touched the red handle. The instant he did, the entire house shivered. Not violently, but deeply. A vibration that rang all the way down the root spine. Below, the glowing corridor dimmed for a heartbeat. The walls flickered. The floor turned. Someone's here, Elias whispered. Someone new. Orren's eyes narrowed. No, he said. Someone old, but buried. The door yawned wider before them. And deep beneath the house, in a chamber not yet reached, something opened its eyes for the first time in a century. And it remembered a name that was not supposed to exist.